A delivery note shows Major Rashid's role.
The Al Jazeera produces this courier receipt of DHL as their document. As it shows, it's been booked on January 11th of 2015 from Dhaka. Now, here is the booking detail from DHL Dhaka office of that day. Wow, there's nothing like that. It means the Al Jazeera producer forged documents. But why?
A country, safe haven for the terrorists.
Qatar has now taken its place in the lead of countries that are supporting Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda.
This is the Taliban office in Doha behind me.
A royal family, funds for destabilizing the Middle East.
It is empowering groups that can destabilize the entire Islamic world.
A state-run television channel has been
talk
used
about trying to
for
fight
their own agenda.
jihadism and the ideology that powers it. Al Jazeera has fomented those problems. It has exacerbated those problems.
So I resigned like a month ago, and that was because of the channel was taking a certain stance on one side.
And now they are planning to expand their notorious desires.
Are thousands of confidential Qatar charity documents, bank transfers, email exchanges, donor lists. The collection unveils the existence of a huge, hitherto unknown funding operation for an extensive network of Islamic associations across Europe.
Philippine Airlines Flight 434 has just taken off from Manila. The plane is full of mostly Japanese tourists and businessmen, but the passenger in seat 26K, Armaldo Forlani, is just now getting to work. Forlani is traveling under a fake passport. His real name is on the list of the FBI's most wanted. Ramzi Youssef.
Ramzi Youssef was the guy who built the bomb and placed the bomb in the World Trade Center bombing in February of 1993.
Ramzi Ahmed Youssef was close to being a genius. With a gang of people who were none too bright, he came within an ace of knocking down the World Trade Center.
Now, Youssef is about to test drive another plot. Hidden in the lavatory, he pieces together a small bomb.
Youssef, who was an electrical engineer, had figured out how to build really small explosive devices that could be taken apart and taken onto an aircraft, bypassing security. The nitroglycerin is put in contact lens solution bottles, and the watch is a watch. I mean, so none of this stuff appears dangerous.
During the flight stopover on the island of Cebu, Youssef gets off the plane. The bomb stays on board. 2 hours later, en route to Tokyo, seat 26K explodes. The blast rips a hole through the floor of the aircraft, tearing through the luggage compartment below.
The bomb went off over the Pacific, but it was a test. It was a small bomb. One person got killed, but the plane managed to land safely.
The plane survives the explosion, but the test run is a success. The first step in a growing plot called Operation Bojinka.
The Bojinka plot was a plot by Ramzi Youssef, KSM, and a couple of other guys out of Manila to plant bombs on 12 airliners and blow up those airliners heading to the United States from Asia, which could have killed about 4,000 people.
They knew then that the bomb would work, if placed in the right place and of sufficient size. The idea then is to multiply the number of bombs, the number of planes. There you go.
As the media lights up with news of the bombing, Yosef reports back to his uncle, the head of the Manila terror cell, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, known at the CIA as KSM.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was born in Kuwait, but he was of a Pakistani Baluchi background, and was born and raised in a very religious family that had ties to the Muslim Brotherhood.
At 16, he joined the Muslim Brotherhood, which is very important for the rest of his career, if you will. Mostly since he started in the Brotherhood, at 16 he had a lot of friends that were gravitating in that world.
He'd been a long-time associate of Al-Qaeda, although it took a while for him to actually join the organization for a variety of reasons that relate mainly to personality.
He had connections with almost everyone in the main, if you will, jihad group.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had some tense relations with Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden.
That began years ago, thousands of miles away. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has avoided capture since he, along with Ramzi Yosef, masterminded the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was able to move around the world, and if you've seen pictures, he was very good at disguising himself. He was involved to an extent with Al-Qaeda, and he was a going concern, as they used to say. He was a very much an active player against the United States.
Terror cell may be engaged in a holy war, but they don't exactly live a fundamentalist lifestyle.
Manila's a destination for sex travel and for entertainment, and so it's got hundreds of bars and things that cater largely to foreigners. And that's where these guys, when they were in town, met with one another.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has always struck me as a man who has grown into Islam. Certainly when we first ran across Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, there was very little indication that he was a true believer. He was a bon vivant, he was a man about town, he was a womanizer.
KSM is much more of a multi-dimensional character than most of the other jihadis that you come across. And KSM is different in the sense that he liked to have a good time, while most of the other guys wouldn't be hanging out with beautiful women in the Philippines. But one of the mysteries of KSM is whether he really believed that or not, or if it was part of his cover to infiltrate the West in order to launch attacks against it.
KSM lived in Qatar from about 1992 to 1996. He was actually being employed as an engineer for the Water and Electricity Ministry. He was also living in an apartment given to him by the Minister of Religious Endowments. While he was there, he was actively involved in terrorist plotting, not only in the World Trade Center bombing in 1994, but also in other attacks.
In Qatar, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed apparently worked for the government, had some minor position as a bureaucrat working for a variety of agencies there, nothing to do with security or the military per se.
Yes, I mean, it's no secret that Abdullah bin Khalid al-Thani was helping and protecting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Within Qatar, his closest associate was Abdullah bin Khalid al-Thani, who served as his patron. Who gave him, it seems, his job. Abdullah bin Khalid al-Thani had been he was eventually elevated to being the interior minister of the country. That's even after having helped Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to escape when the Americans were there to arrest him. So someone who is part of the royal family and was able to continue to get promotions within the bureaucracy, even after having been involved in a significant scandal related to terrorism.
He was traveling all the time, meeting with known associates in the terrorist world, and reportedly planning attacks.
He was involved in the 1993 first World Trade Center bombing that was executed by his nephew, Ramzi Youssef.
Ramzi Youssef tried to blow up the World Trade Center in the United States the first time during the 1990s. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed actually gave him about $660 wired from a Qatari bank because he was living there at the time.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in those days was on the salary of a government ministry, the Ministry of Waterworks in Doha.
He was very close to some members of the Qatari royal family, especially the former Minister of Religious Affairs, who then became Minister of Interior, Abdullah bin Khalid Al Thani.
He was living in Al Thani's apartment complex owned by him. So how did he get that place when he was just a simple water engineer who happened to he was also involved in Islamic militancy?
The Al-Qaeda mastermind disappear to mount another attack.
The FBI went to the Qatari government and said, "We'd like you to turn over this individual who was in charge, who was involved in a bombing in the United States. Please turn him over." And the Qatari government hemmed and hawed and basically tipped him off. And so by the time they raided the apartments, there was nobody there. He was gone.
I frankly don't know why the Qataris refused to extradite Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Did he become an embarrassment? Did he know too much about the Qatari government? Did he know too much about Qatar financing Osama bin Laden?
Somebody in the Qatari government tipped him off, and that led to him leaving the country and basically disappearing from the country.
Louis Freeh, who was the FBI director at the time, was furious at the Qatari government, saying that these guys let this major terrorist out and let him get out of Dodge, essentially, for what reason? The United States really wanted him, and the United States can bring enormous pressure on any government to cough up a single person.
The links that you had those years between especially the Minister of Religious Affairs and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed would have been exposed if Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was to be arrested by the FBI at the time. He would have had to explain where his funding came, which was obviously from Qatar, and that would have been a big scandal. So Qatar held off, and they basically shipped off Khalid Sheikh Mohammed out of the country in order to avoid that kind of scandal. There was some kind of exposure, if you will, of the link of some of the people within the royal family and Al-Qaeda and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but in the end nothing really was done to stop that kind of relationship, and nobody was really punished for that.
Sheikh Mohammed returns to Afghanistan to work with bin Laden on their plot for a second World Trade Center attack. This time using not bombs, but commercial airliners.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed went back to Afghanistan and said, "Look, you really do seem serious about this terrorism stuff. Let's basically launch the 9/11 plots." And it was only after the embassy bombings that KSM believed that bin Laden had the sort of backbone to do it.
Khalid Sheikh says, "I just need some pilots," and bin Laden says, "Hey, I got some. I don't know the pilots yet, but I got 4 guys right here who are willing to do this. Why don't you take them and start planning?"
Within 2 years, their hand-picked soldiers are in flight schools in the United States. And on what they call the Holy Tuesday operation, they send 19 hijackers to make history.
If you looked at bin Laden as the architect of Al-Qaeda, sort of building the structure of it, KSM is almost the engineer who actually, builds the structures and gets things done. And KSM at every step basically, pushed bin Laden away and seized control of the plot and made sure that everything happened according to plan.
The attacks of 9/11 catch an entire nation off guard and prove that Al-Qaeda's reach extends to U.S. soil. It also changes KSM's status from terrorist threat to leader of a deadly international holy war.
He was essentially the director of operations for Al-Qaeda Central up to the 9/11 attacks. He's the one who planned them. Even though Osama bin Laden was the spiritual leader.
He was sort of an entrepreneur of terrorism, meaning that for a long time he was somewhat unaffiliated, but had developed a lot of very deep connections to a variety of key players in the terrorist world, whether it was in the Middle East, whether it was in Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda was based at the time.
All the major security services around the world, not only the Americans but the Brits, the French, you name it, they all knew Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's role.
Had it not been for KSM, there's a good chance the 9/11 attacks and everything that sort of came out afterwards would have never happened, because it was his idea that he'd been working on for the better part of a decade.
He's the one who made Al-Qaeda the dangerous and very deadly group that they became. He's the one who took the guidance from his leaders and made it happen. He recruited people, he trained people, he planned the operations, he supervised the execution of the operations. It was really the mastermind behind the attacks on 9/11. We went to them, we made our request, we gave them the evidence to justify the request. They didn't see it the same way. Their exact motivation for that, the Qataris are probably the best ones to answer that.
Qatar has a history of supporting a variety of players in the terrorist world. Whether that was the case, that we were protecting him or not, I don't know. Obviously, the reaction from the United States was extremely disappointed. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was seen already in the second half of the 90s as a prominent mastermind of terrorist attacks. The U.S. government didn't know that he was planning 9/11, but he had been involved in a variety of plots in the United States, in the Philippines, in the Middle East, and obviously he was quite high up in the food chain of Al-Qaeda, so the U.S. government really wanted him already in the mid-90s.
One of the most remarkable things that happens after 9/11 is that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed consents to a television interview describing his role in the plot. The most wanted man in the world. And what's he do? He calls up a reporter, says, let's sit down and chat.
KSM said in his interview that the attack themselves was to rub our face in what they say they felt for the past 100 years, either at the hands of the United States or the Israelis or the Indians, that it was time the Americans should be humiliated and embarrassed by someone attacking them instead of always the other way around.
Look, the A-team of terrorism don't talk to the press ever, don't even say anything. I mean, the fact that this guy was so eager to claim 9/11 and go to Al-Jazeera, Fuda was working for, is just like nutty.
To me, that probably was not an interview that was sanctioned by Al-Qaeda. To me, that was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the swashbuckler.
Is that the Al-Jazeera has long been a mouthpiece for some of the more radical voices.
Al-Jazeera is not your regular conventional news organization, but something that can be considered a veritable arm of Qatar's policy of trying to get greater hearing from the